The scripture reading today comes from Isaiah. Did you read it? I selected this scripture reading a few weeks ago when I was looking at the lectionary texts. This is one of the scriptures that many churches will be listening to today. And I had to chuckle, I must admit, as it came up, especially the part about they shall mount up with wings like eagles. The Philadelphia Eagles still had to qualify for the Super Bowl. They weren't quite there yet, but I thought, how interesting. I don't know that Isaiah is a football fan, and I don't know that he really had much knowledge about the Philadelphia Eagles, but he is a prophet after all. Here's the reading. Let us join together. Have you not heard? The Lord is the everlasting God, the creator of the ends of the earth. The Lord does not faint or grow weary. The Lord's wisdom is beyond understanding, but gives power to the faint and strengthens the powerless. Even youths will faint and be weary, and the young will fall exhausted. But those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. They shall run and not be weary. They shall walk and not faint. If we back up just a little bit, we understand a little bit more about what Isaiah was talking about. This is commonly known as the beginning of the section of the book of Isaiah attributed to the second Isaiah. The first 39 chapters are attributed to the first Isaiah. Those were written in the 8th century BCE, before Common Era, before Christ. It was at a different area. It was for a different reason. If you understand what Isaiah was about at that particular point, he was condemning the people, the Hebrews, because he was sure God was condemning them. This early Isaiah had this fascinating understanding that God actually lived there in Jerusalem. Literally, God lived in Jerusalem, in the temple, right there. But there was a problem in that God cannot live in any place that is unholy. And Jerusalem had become, in many, many ways, an unholy city. The people had turned their backs on God, it would seem. The people had lost their faith. The people had decided that they knew more than God did, and so they weren't even treating others with dignity and respect a lot of times. So Isaiah was passing along the word from God that you've earned it. It's not going to be nice. It's not going to be pretty. We're going to cleanse this town. And so the destruction of Jerusalem was prophesied by the early Isaiah that it would happen. Everything you came to understand would be gone because God had to clean up the mess. The first 39 chapters of Isaiah are pretty rough. They're pretty coarse. They're pretty, if you will, in your face, that it's not going to go well, and the people have earned it. So hold on to your knickers, because it's going to get messy. But the 40th chapter, the one from which we read this morning, comes from what's called 2nd Isaiah. This is written in the 6th century BCE, 200 years later. And this Isaiah lives in Babylon. If you remember what has happened, what has transpired, is that, sure enough, Jerusalem and Israel and Judah, they are destroyed. Jerusalem, particularly by the Babylonian Empire. They were the big dogs then. They were the ones with all the power and the might, and they got fed up with what was going on, and so they came in and just utterly destroyed Jerusalem, and took the people away. But they did something very intriguing. You see, they had a concept that they wouldn't kill everybody, but they would just take out the leaders, the core of society. It's estimated about 6,000 people. The leaders were taken out. The rest were just left behind to fend for themselves in a broken down world. But these leaders were brought to Babylon. And an interesting thing happened there, that they were given pretty much rights as citizens. They could own property, they could own businesses, they could prosper, and many did. At this point, when 2nd Isaiah is writing, he's living in Babylon. And they've been there for about 50 years. And there's a sense of encouragement now that God has finished punishing. And this Isaiah is trying to get across the point that now God is ready to renew you. God is ready for you to start rebuilding your lives. And so there's something very special in the totally turnaround of how this Isaiah is speaking to the people. But this Isaiah is a poet. And this is a very critical part of this scripture reading. Because there's a format, there's a formula, if you will, of how a lot of the poetry was done. And Isaiah follows this. In that you break down different words and different phrases and you build. I broke it out so you could see. In fact, this is exactly what he does. You remember Sears and Roebuck? You remember the catalogs? Remember the 3 tiers of products? What were they? Good, better, best. You remember that? Well, this is exactly, I'm getting a lot of no's, like, you don't remember that? I guess somebody's aging themselves, isn't he? Huh? Anybody remember phonograph records? Never mind. Good, better, best, though. That was what Sears and Roebuck, and that's what Isaiah was doing in this scripture. He would build on it. So when they were broken into 3 statements, 3 phrases, you'd start out with something good, and then you'd build to something better, and then something best. Now you can see how that works. Start out here. If you want to follow along. The Lord does not faint or grow weary. Well, that's good. You know, you don't want God to faint and grow weary. But then the next one, the Lord's wisdom is beyond understanding. Well, that's even better because God's wisdom is all-encompassing. It's not just about God not fainting and growing weary, but God's wisdom is all-encompassing. And then it ends with, but gives power to the faint and strengthens the powerless. You see, it's not just a concept, but God is actually going to strengthen those people. God is going to give power to the powerless. Good, better, best. It builds. The next grouping, even youths will faint and be weary. Okay. You know, they're busy, they're active, they're trying to do things, but they even sometimes get worn out. And the young will fall exhausted because they're working so hard. And if the young fall exhausted, then what? Well, then he builds into this last one. But those who wait for the Lord shall renew their strength. Now remember, this wait doesn't mean you just sit around twiddling your thumbs. It means you grow close to God. You listen intently to God. You put yourself in the presence of God. You wait for God. And those who wait for God, they shall renew their strength. You know, these youth who get weary? Those who wait, those who draw close to God, they shall renew their strength. And even the young who they fall exhausted. But those of us who wait for the Lord, who listen, our strength will be renewed. He builds. Can you see that, what he's doing? He's really very sophisticated as a poet. And so he builds this enthusiasm, he builds this energy. And then he goes into the last segment. They shall mount up with wings like eagles. An eagle is an amazing creature. You know that possibly, that they have like wingspan of 7 feet or so. They can fly between 30 and 40 miles per hour without any difficulty. And when they're serious, when they're after something, they go up to 100 miles per hour. Their eyesight is 3 to 4 times better than the best we can do as humans. And these talons, I call them claws, these talons that they have, they are amazingly powerful. And they can hold and carry up to 15 pounds of whatever they choose. these eagles are amazing. And how marvelous it is to be able to fly, to soar like an eagle. Huh. And then he says, and they shall run and not be weary. Oh, we have as you by now know, a 2.5-year-old granddaughter, Madison. And now then Nancy and I go to the daycare center to pick her up. And if the weather's nice and we get up there a little early, we just sit out there and watch sometimes on the playground. It looks like an anthill. All these legs and arms just moving, perpetual motion, all over her playmates. Oh my goodness, they go and go and go. And so we pick her up and we drive her to the home, and then she gets out, and you know what she wants to do? She wants to keep running. She has a little path in the house there, our daughter's house, and she'll just run and run and want us to run with her, of course. Yeah, but she will run and not get weary. So Isaiah starts out soaring like a winged eagle, and then running and not get weary, and then they shall walk and not faint. Oops. Do you have the same problem I do? It seems like all of a sudden something's been changed. This good, better, best. Why would it be best to walk and not faint instead of soar like an eagle? What? Did Isaiah make a mistake? Did he forget what he was doing? Or did he know what he was doing? In fact, did he understand the realities of starting over? This is what Isaiah was facing. And these are the people to which he was writing. These Hebrews that were still in Babylon. And yes, many of them had prospered. Many of them were doing very, very well. And now, though, something's getting ready to happen. You see, even though they were prospering there, they had, in many ways, to have to let go of their faith. They were successful monetarily, maybe, but they still had that emptiness inside. But once you get assimilated, into this new style, this new lifestyle, sometimes it becomes very difficult to let go. But there's something else going on the world scene. The Babylonians are no longer the top power. You ever heard of Persia and Cyrus the Great? He's on his way, literally. And there is nothing that is going to stop him. And he will conquer the Babylonians. And they know it. Isaiah knows it. And here are these people now. They've been resettled against their choice, but they have been resettled. And for 50 years, this has become their home. And now they're settled in there. But yet there's still this tentative understanding, this anxiety of what's going to happen next. Do we understand starting over? Do we understand the realities of starting over? I think we do. I think we can relate to them in so many ways. Sometimes we all start over in maybe small ways, but sometimes in significant ways. The loss of a loved one, where we thought we had our life figured out. We thought we had our plans. We thought we knew what direction we were going, but no. And we're forced to start over. And it's hard. Sometimes maybe it's a loss of health. Or you have had a life filled with whatever you wanted to do, more or less you could do, and then all of a sudden the day comes when you find out you have limits. You have to pace yourself. And that's, to me, a 4-letter word, if there ever was one. Having to learn how to pace yourself. But then maybe there's other loss of health. Or maybe there's a loss of a dream. You have this dream, or maybe an image of what life is meant to be. How you perceive what life would be meaningful for you, and then it's taken away. Many of us seem to be struggling right now with the loss of who we thought our country was becoming. There's a lot of pain out there, a lot of frustration. And that sense of we have to start over. We're not done yet. That brings a lot of concern. That brings a lot of anxiety. A lot of fear sometimes. Isaiah understood. This is not the time to soar like an eagle. Even though as tempting as that might sound to be, that's exactly what we need to do when we have to start over. You know, when you can fly above it all. You don't have to get tied up in the messiness of real life. You don't have to worry about what realities are. Fly above it all. Don't worry about it. Just fly. Or run and don't get weary. You know, sometimes there's that temptation that when we have to start over, when we have to kind of reshuffle, when we have to really take a hard look at what we need to be doing and how we can do it, sometimes we get the feeling that, can I just run away from this? Can I just avoid it? Can I just pretend that I really don't have to deal with all this? Instead, can I just kind of leapfrog, take a shortcut, somehow get to where I want to be without? Well, I've learned that a little bit about physical therapy on learning how to do my leg. You can't take shortcuts. So what is it then? Isaiah understood that the best is to learn how to walk again. But walk without fainting. You see, this interesting concept about not fainting. Fainting a lot of times meant that you kind of lost your inner well-being. You kind of lost your sense, your spirit, your soul. You kind of lost, and you just kind of fainted away. But to learn how to walk, take that step by step by step, where you actually engage in the realities. You actually engage in this tough business sometimes of starting over, looking to see what literally is going on. Not maybe what you want to be or what you would presume it could be or make some assumptions, but what really is going on. What really is going on. These Hebrews, the best they would be able to do would be to walk, to take those next steps. You see, Isaiah is preparing them because Cyrus the Great, he's going to do something very intriguing. He's going to call the people, the Hebrews, and say, now, go home. Rebuild. Start your lives over in your own country, in your own faith. And that's scary, having to start over. It can be scary for us sometimes when we have to admit it's time to start over. When maybe we thought we were done. We've done everything we need to. And then all of a sudden we see that life has challenged us. And said, okay, now what are you going to do? Can you pretend to fly above it all? Pretend it doesn't matter? Can you just run as quick as you can? Or are you going to take the time and have the courage to dare to walk step by step through the realities with the courage to not lose sight of who you are? It takes a lot of courage. And yet that's what our journey is about, is it not? One of my favorite images from Fred Craddock. I know Lance talks about Fred a lot, and I do too whenever possible. Fred Craddock, the wonderful Disciples of Christ teacher and preacher, theologian, shares the image of kids being out on the river. And hopefully I've shared this with you one time someplace before. But the kids being on the bank of the river, and they're picking up stones, and they're chunking them across the river, and they're seeing how many steps, how many skips the little stones will go. You get a nice flat when you fling it sidearm, and you get, ooh, I got 3 really good bounces. Well, I got 5. And the kid down there says, I got 7. Thing just skipped all the way across, almost to the middle. But eventually what happens? As it slows down, no longer just skimming the surface, but as it slows down, and it drops into the deep, into the deep. The image of when we stop skimming and allow ourselves to go deep into the waters of life, into the depth of our soul, into the depth of our spirit. That's when we see life. That's when we have the courage to take those step by steps by steps. It would be lovely if we could decide that we never have to stop or start over. That our lives would never be disrupted, that everything that we choose, that we want, will be exactly the way we want it, but we know that's not reality. Just as the Hebrews now would be starting over, and Isaiah knew that. Maybe Isaiah knew that was a common human experience. That we too will start over many times. And what we do after that, the courage we show by not soaring like the eagles, not running and not be weary, but we dare to walk in the midst of our own soul as who we are, as God has created us to be. Is that not